I hit Duluth around 4 in the afternoon, late November, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep and whatever was keeping my hands on the wheel. Autopilot, probably. I'd been driving that way for weeks. The lake came into view when I crested the hill on Superior Street. Lake Superior. It stretched out flat and gray under a sky that matched it pretty much exactly, and the whole thing looked like hammered steel. Cold steel. The kind that would split your knuckles if you hit it wrong. Wind came off the water hard enough to rock the truck at the stoplight, and I felt that metallic bite even through the glass. That's when it hit me. The cold. The specific angle of it. I was right back at Park Point Beach in July with my phone buzzing in my pocket, and some kid in swim trunks running up the sand yelling about someone in the water. Stephen, my brother. 19 years old and gone under in water that looked nothing like this. That had been blue and warm and full of people who didn't notice one guy swimming out too far until it was way too late. I gripped the wheel harder, forced my eyes back to the road. The light turned green. I drove. That loop in my head had been running for months. 4 months, 2 weeks, 5 days. I didn't want to count anymore, but I kept doing it anyway. The same 10-second clip. The kid running, the phone buzzing, the lifeguard sprinting past me toward the water, over and over. Sometimes I'd be stocking a furnace filter at the supply warehouse and I'd just stop, wrench in hand, stuck in that same stupid replay. I figured going rigid was better than going soft. Practical. That's what I needed. So 2 days ago, I walked into the HVAC office in Minneapolis and told my supervisor I was done. Didn't give 2 weeks. Didn't explain. He looked at me like I'd lost it, which was probably fair, and I walked out with my tool belt and nothing else. I drove north that night, picked Duluth because it was far enough and I didn't know anybody there. Figured I'd take whatever work showed up and stop thinking for a while. The temp agency was the first place I found. North Shore Temp Staffing. It sat in a strip mall off Central Entrance, squeezed between a vacuum repair shop and a place that sold janitorial supplies in bulk. The sign in the window said, "Walk-ins welcome," so I walked in. Inside it smelled like burnt coffee and copy toner. Fluorescent lights, gray carpet with traffic patterns worn into it. A couple of plastic chairs that looked like they came from a school cafeteria. A woman sat behind the desk, maybe 40, with auburn hair in one of those neat-styled cuts, and a cardigan that had seen a lot of Mondays. Her name tag said Sharon. She looked up when I came in, smiled the customer service smile. "Help you?" "Looking for work," I said. "What's your trade?" "HVAC, facilities maintenance. I can do basic electric, plumbing, some carpentry." She pulled a clipboard out and slid it across the desk. "Fill this out. We've got a few openings. Overnight stuff mostly." I filled it out. Name, previous employer, skills, references I didn't have anymore. I left the emergency contact line blank. Sharon took the clipboard back and scanned it. Her eyes paused on the blank line, but she didn't ask. Just tapped her pen against the desk a couple of times. "You okay with historical properties?" she said. "Sure." Glen Sheen Mansion needs an overnight facilities watch. Touring season just ended, so it's quiet. Mostly you're there to make sure pipes don't freeze, check the building stays secure, handle any maintenance flags. Starts tonight if you're available. I didn't know what Glen Sheen was. Didn't care. Overnight and quiet sounded exactly right. "I'm available," I said. She printed out a single-page job sheet and handed it to me with a key on a brass tag. "Report at 6, main entrance on London Road. Supervisor's name is Josie Bridges. She'll walk you through protocols." That was it. Didn't ask why I left my last job. Didn't ask for a single thing except whether I could start tonight. I took the key. I showed up at 6, right as the sun was dropping behind the trees. Glen Sheen turned out to be this huge old mansion perched on a slope above the lake, all dark brick and sharp roof lines and more windows than anybody needed. It looked like the kind of place rich people built back when having 39 rooms made sense. The grounds were massive. Bare trees everywhere, walkways lined with iron fencing, garden beds mulched over for winter. I parked in the back lot and walked up to the main entrance. The wind was worse up here. It came straight off the lake and hit the side of the building hard enough that I could hear it rattle the windows. The whole place seemed to shift a little, like it couldn't settle. Inside was warmer, quiet in a way that felt heavy, the kind of quiet you get in libraries or funeral homes. My boots made too much noise on the hardwood floors. The entry hall smelled like lemon oil and old books. There were rugs that looked too expensive to walk on and furniture roped off with velvet cords. Everything had a little placard next to it explaining what it was and who owned it 100 years ago. I didn't read them. A woman came down the main staircase before I'd taken 10 steps. Probably mid-50s, gray hair pulled back tight, wearing a wool skirt and a blouse that had buttons all the way to her collar. She looked at me the way you'd look at someone tracking mud. "Albert Castillo," she said. "That's me. Josie Bridges, site manager." She didn't offer her hand, just gestured for me to follow her down a side hallway. "Sharon said you have facilities experience." "Yeah." "Good. Most of what you'll do is monitoring. Thermostats, humidity levels, door checks. There's a logbook in the office. You'll record readings every 2 hours." We walked through a series of rooms that all kind of blurred together. Sitting rooms, parlors, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, everything roped off, everything untouchable. Josie kept talking while we walked, rattling off instructions in a clipped voice that didn't leave room for questions. "No visitors after hours. Doors stay locked except the staff entrance you came through. If anything trips the security panel, you call me first, then police. Do not investigate on your own. Do not touch the collection items. Do not move furniture." "Got it," I said. She stopped at a narrow door tucked under the main staircase and pulled it open. Inside was a small office, barely big enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. A space heater sat in the corner next to a coffee pot that looked older than me. The logbook sat open on the desk, pages filled with tight handwriting in blue ink. "Your shift runs 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., Josie said. "You'll have the building to yourself. Bathrooms are staff only down the hall to the left. Kitchen is off limits unless there's an emergency." She handed me a laminated sheet with a checklist printed on it. 20-some items. Thermostats, window locks, basement sump pump, attic moisture check. Routine stuff. "Questions?" she said. I looked at the list, looked at the office. "No." "Good." She turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "One more thing. If you hear anything unusual, don't go looking for it." I waited for her to explain. She didn't. "Unusual like what?" I said. "You'll know it if you hear it." She met my eyes for the first time since I'd arrived. "This house has been here a long time. It makes noise, settles. You're here to keep it standing, not to figure out why the floorboards creak. Understand?" I nodded. She left. I stood there in the little office under the stairs and listened to the wind hammer the windows. The house did creak, beams shifting somewhere overhead, pipes ticking behind the walls. Old buildings did that. I knew that. I'd worked in plenty of them. I told myself it was just a building, just a routine. Check the thermostats, log the readings, keep my head down and my hands busy. Exactly what I needed. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, moving across the ceiling from east to west. Josie's car was already gone. I'd watched her leave through the window. I stood still and listened. The footsteps stopped. The house settled again. Just the wind. Just old wood. I picked up the clipboard and started my first round. Josie found me near the utility room around 8 that night. I'd made it through most of the first floor checklist without issue. Thermostats all reading between 68 and 70, windows latched, no water pooling anywhere obvious. I was crouched beside the sump pump in the basement corner when I heard her heels on the concrete stairs. She didn't announce herself, just appeared at the bottom step holding a small laminated card, white with black text, about the size of something you'd keep in a wallet. Mr. Castillo, I stood. Thought you'd left. I had. There's an addendum to your duties. She held out the card. This supersedes the general checklist. I took it. The laminate was warm, probably from her pocket. 9 lines of text, single-spaced, no header, just numbered 1 through 9. Read them aloud, she said. I glanced at her. She wasn't asking, so I read the first one. Keep the boathouse door chained at all times. Repeat it back. Keep the boathouse door chained. At all times. At all times, I said. She nodded once. Next. I looked back at the card. Restart the grandfather clock within 1 minute if it stops. Repeat. Restart the grandfather clock within 1 minute if it stops. Where is the clock? I hadn't seen a grandfather clock. I don't know. 2nd floor landing, east wall. You'll hear it if it stops. She gestured to the card. Continue. This felt like training I hadn't signed up for, but I figured she was the type who needed things done her way. I kept going. Never cross the carpeted ballroom after midnight. Repeat it. Never cross the carpeted ballroom after midnight. The ballroom is on the 3rd floor, north wing. You may enter before midnight if required. After, use the service stairs. I nodded. She waited until I said, understood. 4th rule. Close every curtain when fog presses against the windows. Repeat. I did. She added nothing, just watched me with those pale gray eyes until I moved to the next line. Mop wet footprints with salt water instead of bleach. Repeat it. I repeated it. My voice sounded flat in the concrete space. She didn't explain where I'd find salt water or why bleach was off limits. Didn't seem like she planned to. Next. Ignore any voice from the dock. She didn't blink. Repeat. Ignore any voice from the dock. Precisely that. No investigation, no response. Got it. Next. I checked the card again. 3 left. Ring the servant bell once at 2:11 a.m. Repeat it. Ring the servant bell once at 2:11 a.m. The bell is in the kitchen. Pull cord. Single ring. Return to your rounds immediately after. I thought about her earlier instruction that the kitchen was off limits except for emergencies. But I didn't bring it up. She clearly had her system. Next. I read the 8th rule. It was shorter. Do not open the attic hatch between sunset and sunrise. Repeat. I did. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Then she said, the hatch is clearly marked. You won't miss it. Okay. Last one. The 9th line was the longest. If you see a figure standing in the garden facing the lake, leave it undisturbed and log the time. I read it back to her word for word. When I finished, she stepped closer and tapped the card with one thin finger. These are not suggestions, Mr. Castillo. They are conditions of employment. Adherence is mandatory. Understood. You'll initial here. She produced a pen from her coat pocket and a small spiral notebook, flipped to a page that already had today's date written at the top in her tight handwriting, a line beneath it. I initialed. She took the notebook back, capped the pen, and turned toward the stairs without another word. Josie. She paused, one hand on the railing. These rules, I said, they part of the historical preservation, or they are part of the property management protocol, she said. That's all you need to know. Then she went upstairs, and I heard the back door latch a minute later. I stood there in the utility room holding the laminated card, reading the list again. Some of it made sense in a stretched sort of way. Old houses near water got fog. Wet footprints probably meant a leak or condensation. A voice from the dock could be trespassers, and maybe the estate had issues with people wandering the grounds. The rest was odd, but not impossible. Rich places had weird rules. I'd worked a museum loading dock once in St. Paul where we weren't allowed to use the elevator on Thursdays because the director thought it threw off the humidity cycle. People with money got particular about their buildings. I figured Josie was the nervous type. Wanted everything done exactly right, no deviations. The repetition thing felt like overkill, but some supervisors ran their sites that way. Maybe she'd had temps screw up before. The grandfather clock rule was the only one that felt urgent. 1 minute to restart it. That meant I'd need to move fast if I heard it stop, which probably meant I'd be hearing it all night and checking my watch every time it ticked. I folded the card into my jacket pocket and finished checking the sump pump. Everything looked fine. Dry floor, no weird smells, float switch clear. Upstairs, I logged the basement check in the office, poured another cup of coffee from the pot I'd started earlier, and pulled the laminated card back out. I read it 3 more times, committing the list to memory. Then I went looking for the places it mentioned. The grandfather clock was right where Josie said. 2nd floor landing, east wall. Tall, dark wood case, brass face, pendulum swinging slow and steady behind a glass panel. The time matched my watch. I stood there for 30 seconds listening to it tick, loud enough that I'd hear it from the 1st floor if it quit. Probably. The ballroom took longer to find. I went up to the 3rd floor using the main stairs, walked north through 2 smaller sitting rooms, and found a set of double doors at the end. Unlocked. I pushed one open. The room was big, hardwood floor in the center with a patterned carpet running the length of it, deep red with gold thread. Tall windows on 3 sides, all curtained. A chandelier overhead unlit. I checked my watch. 8:43. Still a few hours before the midnight cutoff, but I didn't have a reason to be in here anyway. I closed the door and made a note of the service stairs Josie mentioned. Found them tucked behind a narrow door on the south side. Steep plain wood, no carpet. They'd get me to the 3rd floor without crossing the ballroom if I needed to check something up here after midnight. The servant bell was exactly where she said. Kitchen, pull cord hanging beside the pantry door. Braided red fabric with a wooden handle. I gave it a small tug, not enough to ring it. The cord had tension. It worked. I checked my watch again and set a mental alarm for 2:11. That gave me 5.5 hours. The attic hatch I didn't go looking for. If it was clearly marked, I'd see it during rounds. No reason to poke around. I didn't go down to the dock. It was dark, cold, and I had no reason to check a boathouse tonight. That could wait for daylight tomorrow if Josie wanted it inspected. Back in the office, I pulled out the roll of tape I'd seen in the desk drawer earlier and stuck the laminated card to the wall beside the clipboard Josie had given me on the first walkthrough. 2 lists now, the general checklist with 20+ items, and the 9 rules. I looked at them side by side. The rules felt different, more specific, the kind of thing you wrote down after something went wrong. First paycheck came 4 days later. I didn't expect it that fast. Sharon from the temp agency had said weekly, but I figured that meant end of the week. Instead, it showed up on a Thursday morning, slipped under the office door sometime after my shift ended. I found it when I came back that evening. Plain manila envelope, not too thick. My name on the front in typed label print. No return address. I opened it. Cash. 20s mostly. I counted it twice. $320. 40 hours at $8 an hour. The math checked. No pay stub, no paperwork. Just the bills and a stamp on the envelope flap. County seal, dark blue ink. Didn't say which county office or department. Just the seal. I folded the cash into my wallet and stuck the envelope in the desk drawer. It felt off, but not off enough to walk away from. Jobs that paid under the table weren't exactly rare. I'd done drywall for a guy in Bloomington once who handed me cash in a Culver's bag at the end of every day. Still, the county seal made it feel official and not official at the same time. Like someone wanted a record that they'd paid me but didn't want anyone checking too close on how. I figured the job answered to someone I'd never meet, Some county department that managed historical properties and didn't want to process temps through normal payroll. Easier to hand out cash and keep it simple. I didn't ask Sharon about it the next time I saw her. She'd probably just say that's how the client wanted it handled. The work itself stayed routine. I did my rounds every 2 hours, logged everything on the clipboard, checked thermostats and windows and the sump pump. The grandfather clock kept ticking. No fog showed up thick enough to worry about curtains. I didn't see any wet footprints. At 2:11 a.m., every night, I went into the kitchen and pulled the servant bell cord once. Single ring, bright and sharp in the quiet house. Then I went back to my rounds like Josie said. I didn't know why. Didn't ask. It was just another line on the list. The house made noise, but I got used to it. Radiators ticking when the heat kicked on. Dehumidifier humming in the basement. Wind rattling the windows on the lakeside. Floorboards creaking overhead when the temperature dropped and the wood contracted. Normal sounds. Old building sounds. I kept the laminated card on the wall and checked it twice a shift, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Boathouse chained. Clock running. Ballroom avoided after midnight. Bell rung at 2:11. It all felt manageable. Eccentric, maybe, but manageable. Then on my 6th night, a little past 10, I was walking through the second-floor hallway when the grandfather clock stopped. The first shift was easier if I didn't think about it. Just another building. Just another checklist. I'd done this before at the warehouse. Thermostats, fire exits, compressor temps. Different equipment, same principle. You walk the route, you check the boxes, you log the numbers. The routine crowds everything else out. That's the point. I started at the basement around 6:30. Sump pump dry. Dehumidifier humming. Floor drains clear. The concrete down there smelled like mineral water and old stone, and the fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed just enough to fill the quiet. I wrote it all down on the clipboard. Temperature 64 degrees. No pooling. Float switch operational. Back upstairs, I hit the thermostats. Living room, 68. Parlor, 69. Library, 70. The radiators ticked when the heat cycled on, metal expanding in the pipes behind the walls. Normal building sounds. I'd heard worse in the warehouse. Belt conveyors screaming at 3 a.m., pneumatic valves hissing, forklifts beeping in the loading bay. This place was quiet by comparison. I checked window latches on the first floor. 17 windows total, all secure. The ones facing the lake rattled a little when the wind picked up, but the locks held. I logged it. Moved on. The grandfather clock stood on the second-floor landing where Josie said it would be. Tall, dark wood case, brass face, glass panel showing the pendulum swinging steady. The time matched my watch, 10 after 7. I stood there for a second, watching the pendulum arc back and forth, catching the dim hallway light. The ticking was loud up close, mechanical, predictable. I didn't touch it. I found the ballroom on the 3rd floor. 2 sitting rooms north through the main hall, then double doors at the end. The room stretched maybe 40 feet long with tall windows on 3 sides and a red and gold carpet running down the center. Hardwood floor under that. Unlit chandelier overhead. It was 8:15, hours before midnight. I noted the service stairs on the south wall. Narrow door, steep steps, no carpet. Alternate route if I needed it later. Back to the office under the main staircase. I poured more coffee from the pot I'd started earlier and taped the laminated card to the wall beside the general checklist. 9 rules. I read them again. Keep the boathouse door chained. Restart the clock within 1 minute. Don't cross the ballroom after midnight. Close curtains when fog presses the windows. Mop wet footprints with salt water. Ignore any voice from the dock. Ring the servant bell at 2:11 a.m. Don't open the attic hatch between sunset and sunrise. If you see a figure in the garden facing the lake, leave it alone and log the time. I figured they were preservation protocols. Old houses had specific requirements. Temperature ranges, humidity controls, pest prevention. Maybe the footprints thing was about lake water damage. Maybe the clock regulated some kind of environmental system. I didn't know. Didn't need to know. I just needed to follow the list. At 9:40, I did another round. Basement, first floor, second floor. Everything the same. Thermostat stable, windows locked, sump pump dry. The floorboards creaked overhead once while I was in the library, but that was just temperature change, wood expanding and contracting. I'd heard Josie mention it the first night. Settling noises. I logged everything and sat back down in the office. The space heater hummed beside the desk. The coffee tasted burnt, but I drank it anyway. Outside the small window, the grounds were dark except for a single lamppost near the iron fence. I couldn't see the lake from here, but I could hear the wind coming off it, low and constant. At 11:47, the grandfather clock stopped. I was in the second floor hallway checking a thermostat when the ticking cut out. Just stopped. The silence landed hard, louder than the ticking had been. I turned and looked down the hall toward the landing. The clock stood there in the shadows, case dark against the wall. I walked over fast, not running, just moving. The brass face read 11:47. The pendulum hung motionless behind the glass panel, stopped mid-swing. 1 minute. That's what the card said. Restarted within 1 minute. I opened the glass panel and reached in. The pendulum was cold under my hand, heavier than I expected. I gave it a gentle push to the right and let go. It swung, caught, kept going. The ticking resumed, loud and steady, filling the hallway again. I exhaled and stepped back, and that's when I felt it. A sharp metallic click traveled up through the floorboards under my boots. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration. It moved fast, from somewhere below up through the wood and into my legs, and the air in the hallway shifted. Pressure releasing. The way a sealed room feels when you crack a window. I stood there with my hand still on the clock case. The ticking continued, regular and mechanical, but the air felt different. Lighter, or maybe just moving again. I told myself it was the heating system. Pressure valve, steam release, something in the pipes. Old buildings had all kinds of mechanical quirks. I'd felt weirder things in the warehouse. Compressor kickbacks, hydraulic surges. This wasn't that different. I logged the restart time in the office. 11:48. Clock restarted per protocol. I wrote it in the spiral notebook Josie had given me and set the pen down. My hand was shaking a little. I figured it was the coffee. At 11:56, I started another round. Basement first. Everything the same. Sump pump dry, dehumidifier running, drains clear. I came back upstairs and checked the first floor thermostats. Living room, parlor, library, all stable. I was walking through the foyer toward the office when the smell hit me. Algae. Thick and organic. The way lake water smells in August when it's been sitting stagnant too long. Green rot and wet stone. I stopped in the middle of the foyer and turned my head, trying to place it. The smell was stronger near the front entrance by the marble floor and the carved wooden doors. I walked toward it slowly, breathing through my mouth. The temperature felt fine. 68, according to the thermostat on the wall. No drafts, no open windows. But the smell kept getting thicker, damp and vegetable. And when I looked down at the marble, I saw water. Just a ribbon at first. Thin line of wetness running from the door toward the base of the main staircase. I crouched down and touched it. Cold. My fingers came away slick, and the algae smell was worse up close. I wiped my hand on my pants and stood up. That's when I saw the footprints. Wet marks on the marble. Small. Maybe a kid's size, barefoot, each one distinct. 5 toes, narrow heel, the arch visible in the print. They started at the door and moved toward the staircase in a straight line, evenly spaced like someone had walked in dripping wet and just kept going. I looked at my watch. 11:59, near midnight. The card said mop wet footprints with salt water instead of bleach. I stood there staring at the prints for a few seconds. They were fresh, still glistening. The water pooled a little in the center of each one where the weight had pressed down. No one had come through the front door. I'd been in the building since 6. Josie left hours ago. All the doors were locked except the staff entrance and back, and I hadn't heard anything. The algae smell made my eyes water. I walked to the kitchen, found the sink, and opened the cabinet underneath. Cleaning supplies on the left, bottles of wood polish, glass cleaner, a scrub brush. On the right, a yellow bucket and a stack of small paper packets. I pulled one out and read the label. Salt. Plain table salt. The kind you'd use for cooking, packed in single-serve restaurant portions. There were maybe 30 packets total, bundled together with a rubber band. Josie had left them here. Had to be. This wasn't random. I grabbed the bucket, filled it halfway with warm water from the tap, and tore open 10 packets. Poured the salt in and swirled it with my hand until it dissolved. The water turned cloudy for a second, then cleared. I found a mop in the corner closet, old string type with a wooden handle, and dunked it in the bucket. Back to the foyer. The footprints were still there, maybe a dozen total, leading from the door to the base of the stairs. The algae smell hadn't faded. If anything, it was stronger, like the air itself was wet. I started at the door and worked my way toward the stairs, dipped the mop, wrung it out, dragged it across the first print. The water hissed a little when it hit the marble. Not loud, just a soft sizzle, the way hot oil sounds when you add something cold. I kept going. Second print, third. The mop head turned gray almost immediately, soaking up whatever was in the footprints. Not just water, but something thicker, darker. I wrung it out in the bucket, and the water came off cloudy and faintly green. My arms started shaking around the 8th print. Not from effort exactly, just tension. I was gripping the handle too hard, shoulders locked, breathing shallow. I made myself slow down. Dip, ring, mop. Dip, ring, mop. The prints dissolved under the salt water, edges blurring first, and then the whole shape breaking apart into gray brine that spread thin across the marble and vanished. By the time I reached the staircase, the bucket was half full of gray-green water that smelled worse than the footprints had. The foyer floor was wet but clean. No more prints, no more ribbon of water by the door. The algae smell was fading, replaced by the sharp mineral scent of salt. I picked up the bucket and carried it back to the kitchen. My hands were still shaking. I told myself it was fine. Just protocol. Josie had left the salt for a reason, and I'd followed the instructions. That was the job. There was a utility sink in the back corner of the kitchen, deeper than the main sink, with a wide drain and no faucet. I'd seen it during the first walkthrough. I carried the bucket over and tilted it, pouring the gray water down the drain in one steady stream. The water hit the bottom and disappeared, and something below answered. A slow exhale, deep and wet, like air moving through a flooded pipe. It vibrated up through the drain, into the porcelain basin, and I felt it in my hands where I gripped the bucket. Not loud, just present. A breath traveling upward from somewhere far below. I stepped back. The bucket slipped from my hands and clattered into the sink, empty. The sound echoed in the kitchen. The exhale faded, stopped. I stood there staring at the drain. Dark circle of metal, water still dripping from the rim. Nothing moved, no sound, just the hum of the refrigerator in the corner and my own breathing, too fast and too shallow. I picked up the bucket and set it beside the sink, rinsed my hands under the main faucet, dried them on my pants. Walked back to the office and sat down at the desk. My watch read 12:07. I wrote it in the logbook. Wet footprints mopped per protocol, salt water used, disposal completed. I didn't write anything about the exhale, didn't know what I'd say. Outside the window, the wind picked up off the lake, rattling the glass in its frame. The space heater hummed. The grandfather clock ticked upstairs, steady and regular. I sat there with the pen in my hand and stared at the laminated card on the wall. 9 rules. I'd followed 2 of them tonight. The clock, the footprints. 7 left. At 12:26 a.m., I heard my name called from outside. It came through the window facing the lake. Quiet, but clear. Just my name, Albert. I stopped moving. The clipboard in my hand dropped half an inch before I caught it. The voice had Stephen's rhythm. That upward tilt at the end, turning a statement into an invitation. The way he used to call me from the porch when I was working in the garage. Same cadence, same warmth. I stood in the second-floor hallway and didn't breathe. The rule said ignore any voice from the dock. Number 6 on the laminated card. I'd read it probably 20 times by now. My feet wanted to move toward the window. My chest felt tight. I thought about the voicemail, the one Stephen left 4 hours before he drowned. "Hey Albert, it's me. We're at the beach. You should come down." Just those words. I'd played it twice after the funeral and then deleted it because I couldn't stand hearing it again. This voice outside had the exact same cadence. I forced myself to turn around. Walked back toward the main staircase. My legs felt wooden. The office felt too exposed. Big window facing the front lawn, no curtains. I needed somewhere with fewer entry points and something to look at that wasn't the lake. There was a small study off the library. I'd seen it during my first walkthrough. No windows, just bookshelves and a narrow desk with a security monitor set up. 3 small screens showing camera feeds from around the property. I locked myself in. The study smelled like dust and old leather. The monitors glowed pale gray in the dark. I pulled the desk chair over and sat down hard. 3 feeds. One showed the front gate and driveway. One showed the back lot where my truck was parked. One showed the shoreline and dock. I stared at the shoreline feed and told myself it was procedure. Just monitoring the property, that's all. The dock stretched out into the lake, a narrow line of weathered wood with a single light at the end. The boathouse sat to the left, dark and squat with the chain visible across the door even on the grainy feed. Nothing moved. I watched for 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then the fog started rolling in. It came off the lake fast, thick and low, spilling over the water like something poured. Not drifting, pouring. Within 30 seconds, it swallowed the boathouse completely. The pier lights turned into blurred halos. The dock faded to a gray smudge. I leaned closer to the screen. The shoreline camera had night vision. Everything showed up in washed-out gray-green, grainy but visible. At the end of the dock, just past the light, there was a figure. I stopped breathing again. It stood facing the mansion, completely still. The proportions were wrong, arms too long, joints too straight. The head tilted at an angle like it was listening for something. I couldn't make out details, just a shape. Human-sized but not human-shaped. The feed flickered once. Static rolled across the screen. When it cleared, the figure had moved. It was right next to the boathouse door now, 20 feet closer than it had been a second ago. No walking. Just there, positioned exactly where the chain was. I shoved the chair back and stood up. My hands were shaking. The figure didn't move again. It just stood there, head still tilted, facing the building. I looked at my watch. 12:41 a.m. An hour and a half until I had to ring the servant bell. I sat back down, kept my eyes on the monitors. The figure stayed where it was, motionless beside the boathouse. The front gate feed showed nothing. The back lot feed showed my truck and empty pavement. I didn't look away from the screens until 2:10 a.m. At 2:11, I unlocked the study door and walked to the kitchen. My legs felt stiff. I'd been sitting for over an hour without moving. just watching that figure stand there in the fog. The kitchen was cold. The servant bell cord hung beside the pantry door, red fabric slightly frayed at the bottom. I pulled it once. The bell rang sharp and bright, cutting through the silence. I stepped back immediately, just like I'd done every other night. Then I heard the second bell. It came from inside the walls, muffled and distant, like it was ringing underwater or from somewhere far below the house. Same pitch as the servant bell, but softened, dampened. It rang once and stopped. I stood there for 5 seconds. 10. Nothing else happened. I walked back toward the office, passing the main staircase. The grandfather clock ticked steadily on the second-floor landing. Then it stopped. I froze halfway down the hall. No gradual wind down, just an immediate stop, the same way it had quit earlier in the week. I checked my watch. 2:12 a.m., 1 minute after I'd rung the bell. I turned and headed for the stairs, pulling out my notebook to log the restart time. When I reached the second-floor landing, I glanced at the clock. Pendulum stopped mid-swing. Hands frozen at 2:12. I opened the glass panel and pushed the pendulum. It swung once, twice, and the ticking resumed. That metallic click vibrated up through the floor again, same as before. Pressure shift in the air like something unsealing. I logged the time. 2:13 a.m. Then I headed back downstairs to check the study monitors. The screens were dark, all 3 feeds, just black. I tapped the monitor glass, nothing. I checked the power cable, still plugged in. The monitors were on. I could see the faint glow of the backlights, but the feeds were gone. I pressed the button to cycle through cameras. The front gate feed stayed black. The back lot feed stayed black. The third monitor flickered once, then showed the ballroom. I hadn't seen a ballroom camera before. Didn't know there was one. The feed showed the third-floor ballroom from a high corner angle. The red and gold carpet ran the length of the room, lit by moonlight coming through the tall windows. The moonlight pooled on the carpet in wide, pale patches. It didn't look right. Too thick, too still. It looked like standing water. I stared at the screen for a long time. The image didn't change. Just the ballroom, just the carpet, just that strange pooled light. I backed out of the study and went to the office. My phone was on the desk. I picked it up and tried calling North Shore temp staffing. Sharon's business card was taped to the wall above the desk with the after-hours number written in blue pen. No signal, not even one bar. I'd had 2 bars when I checked it earlier in the shift. Around 9 p.m., I put the phone down and picked up the landline. The mansion had an old corded phone on the desk, beige plastic with a rotary dial. I lifted the receiver and held it to my ear. Static, not dead air, not a dial tone. Static like lake wash, soft and rhythmic, rising and falling like water against a pier. Underneath it, steady and faint, I heard tapping. It matched the rhythm the grandfather clock should have been making. The same interval, the same beat. I held the receiver away from my ear and looked at it. The tapping continued, faint but constant. I hung up. The office felt too quiet. The space heater hummed in the corner. Wind rattled the window glass. I sat down at the desk and stared at the laminated card taped to the wall. 9 rules. I'd followed 6 of them so far tonight. 3 left. At 2:53 a.m., headlights swept across the office window. I stood up from the desk fast enough that the chair rolled back and hit the filing cabinet. I wasn't expecting anyone. Josie had said her role ended for the season after orientation. That was it. Just the checklist and the rules and me alone until 6 a.m. I went to the window and watched a dark sedan pull into the back lot beside my truck. The engine cut. The driver's door opened. Josie stepped out wearing the same wool coat and boots, carrying nothing. Moving like 3 in the morning was a normal time to show up at a mansion on the lake. I didn't know if I was relieved or more on edge. She came in through the staff entrance without knocking. I heard the door close, heard her boots on the hardwood, and then she was standing in the office doorway, looking at me with that same unreadable expression she'd had during orientation. "Evening," she said. "Thought you were done for the season." Second night inspection. She stepped inside and pulled off her gloves, one finger at a time. Standard protocol. I didn't move from the window. "You didn't mention that." "Didn't need to." She folded the gloves and tucked them into her coat pocket. "You're still here. That's what matters." She walked to the desk and picked up the spiral notebook I'd been logging in. She flipped it open and scanned the entries. Her eyes moved left to right, slow and methodical. I'd logged the grandfather clock restart at 2:13 a.m. and the servant bell at 2:11 a.m. I'd logged the wet footprints at 12:07 a.m. and the first clock restart at 11:48 p.m. I hadn't logged the voice from the dock or the figure on the monitor or the phone static. Josie turned a page, read, turned another. She didn't comment. Just read each line like she was checking boxes in her head. "Where's the bucket?" she asked. "Kitchen. Utility sink." She set the notebook down and walked out of the office. I followed her. Didn't think about it. Just did. The kitchen was cold and smelled faintly of salt. Josie went straight to the utility sink in the back corner and looked into the basin. The yellow bucket was still there where I'd left it, tipped on its side. A few drops of gray-green water dried along the rim. She picked up the bucket and tilted it toward the overhead light, inspected the inside, set it down. Then she opened the cabinet under the main sink and pulled out the bundle of salt packets. She counted them. I'd used 10. There were maybe 20 left. "You use salt water," she said, not a question. That's what the card said. "How many packets?" 10. Bucket was half full. She nodded once and put the bundle back under the sink. Then she straightened and looked at me. Her face was calm, blank, almost. No concern, no curiosity, no surprise. "Every caretaker gets a second night inspection," she said. "Proves they can follow instructions under pressure." "That what this is?" "Yes." I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. My hands were still cold from the mop water. "You already knew what I'd find tonight." "I knew what the house does." "And you didn't warn me." "The card warned you." She pulled her gloves back out of her pocket and started putting them on. "You followed the rules. That's all the job requires. You didn't ask what I saw." She paused. One glove on, one off. Looked at me with those pale gray eyes that didn't give anything away. "I don't need to ask," she said. That was it. She tugged the second glove on and walked past me out of the kitchen. I stood there for a second trying to figure out if I should feel validated or terrified. She already knew. She'd always known. The footprints, the voice, the figure on the dock, none of it was new to her. I followed her again. She didn't go back to the office. Instead, she turned left down the hallway toward the mudroom at the side entrance. It was a narrow space with hooks on the wall and a wooden bench, and a small window that looked out toward the lake. There was a pegboard above the bench with labeled keys hanging from brass hooks. Josie walked straight to the pegboard and took down a key ring. 3 keys on a rusted metal loop. The label read, "Boathouse" in faded ink. She didn't hesitate, didn't ask permission, just unhooked them and slipped the ring into her coat pocket. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Follow me." She opened the side door and stepped outside into the cold. I grabbed my parka off the hook and pulled it on as I went after her. The snow squeaked underfoot. It was that specific sound you only get when the temperature drops below 20 and the crystals compress and shear under your boots. The fog was still thick, rolling off the lake in slow waves, and when I breathed it in through my nose, it tasted sweet. Not sugar sweet. Sweet, like rot trapped in cold air, organic decay held in suspension. I zipped the parka up to my throat and shoved my hands in my pockets. Josie was already halfway down the path toward the lake. She didn't have a flashlight, didn't slow down, just walked like she'd done it 100 times and didn't need to see where she was going. I followed her into the fog. The path sloped downward through bare trees and snow-covered garden beds. I could hear the lake now, not waves, just a low, persistent hush, like white noise played through bad speakers. The fog thickened as we got closer to the water, and the sweetness in the air got stronger. I tried breathing through my mouth, but I could taste it on my tongue. Wet and wrong. Josie didn't look back. She just kept walking. The dock appeared out of the fog first, a long wooden structure extending into the lake with a single light at the end, dim and yellow and barely cutting through the mist. To the left was the boathouse, small building, maybe 15 feet wide, dark wood siding, a single door facing the path, and across the door, the chain. Heavy links looped through an iron bracket and secured with a thick brass padlock. I'd seen it on the monitor. Rule 1. Keep the boathouse door chained at all times. Josie walked straight to it and pulled the keyring out of her pocket. "Wait," I said. She didn't wait. She fitted one of the keys into the padlock and turned it. The lock clicked open. She pulled it free from the chain and let it hang from the bracket. Then she started unwinding the chain, link by link, the metal scraping against the wood. "Rule 1, I said. "It's supposed to stay chained. Rule 1 is for workers like you." She pulled the last loop free and let the chain drop into the snow. It landed with a muffled thump. "Not for me." I stared at her. The fog pressed in around us, thick and cold and sweet. The lake hissed behind the boathouse. "What's that mean?" She looked at me, calm, steady, like we were having a completely normal conversation. "The thing you saw on the monitor," she said. "It comes for people who are hollowed out. Grief does that, carves you empty, makes space for something else to slip inside." My chest tightened. I didn't say anything. "Winter job postings are designed to attract them," she continued. "People running from something. People with nothing left to lose. No emergency contacts, no references, no one who'll notice if they don't come back." I thought about the application I'd filled out, the blank line where the emergency contact should have been. Sharon noticing but not asking. "You're saying this was targeted." "I'm saying the house needs caretakers who will follow the rules without asking why." She tilted her head slightly. "And you did. Every single one." The realization hit slow. Not a shock. Just a cold, creeping understanding that spread through my ribs and into my stomach. The rules weren't protections. They were conditioning. Step by step. Restart the clock. Mop the footprints. Ring the bell. Don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Just obey. And I had. I'd done exactly what they wanted. I grabbed her wrist before she could touch the door. Josie's skin felt wrong under my fingers. Not cold. Waterlogged. That's the only word I had for it. Like meat left in a sink too long, bloated and soft, the texture giving way when I squeezed. Her head turned toward me, slow, way too slow, and her eyes were wrong, too. Filmed over. Pale. That milky look you get on a lake when ice is starting to form across the surface. Not quite solid, but not quite water anymore. I yanked her back hard. She stumbled in the snow, her boots catching on the path. The keyring slipped from her fingers and landed near the boathouse door. I didn't let go of her wrist. I couldn't. My hand was shaking and her skin felt like it might just split open if I pressed too hard. That's when the voice came from the dock. Not my name this time. A laugh. Steven's laugh. I knew it immediately. The same hitch at the end, the way it used to trail off when he was messing with me. Light, Easy, familiar. The kind of sound that made you want to turn around and see what the joke was. It pushed through the fog like a physical thing, sliding up the path toward us, wrapping around my ribs. "Just open it," the voice said. Stephen's cadence, Stephen's timing. "Come on, you know you want to." The fog thickened. The sweet rot smell got stronger, coating the back of my throat. I dragged Josie up the path. She didn't fight me. That bugged me more than if she had. She just stumbled along, her boots scraping through the snow, her wrist limp in my hand. Her head kept turning back toward the boathouse like she was being pulled by a string. "Albert," the voice called. Still Stephen's laugh underneath it. "You're so close, just let her finish." I didn't answer. I kept pulling. The mansion appeared through the fog, the dark brick and sharp roof lines resolving out of the gray. I made it to the side door and shoved it open with my shoulder, hauling Josie through after me. She hit the mudroom bench and I slammed the door shut, flipping the deadbolt with my free hand. The metal clicked into place. The fog pressed against the small window. I could see it. Thick and white and wrong, pushing against the glass like something alive. I let go of Josie's wrist and stepped back. My hand was shaking worse now. I looked down at my palm. There was a faint, damp outline where I'd been gripping her like condensation. Josie sat on the bench, staring at the door. Her eyes were still filmed over. She didn't blink. I turned and walked into the hallway. The foyer opened up ahead of me. Marble floor, main staircase. Everything quiet except for the wind rattling the lake-facing windows. Then I smelled it. Algae, thick and organic. Lake water. I stopped in the doorway. Wet footprints crossed the marble, starting at the front entrance and leading toward the servant bell hallway. Not the small child-sized prints from before. These were bigger, adult-sized, maybe larger. The toes were too long and the arch was too narrow and the spacing between steps was too even, like something walking on autopilot. The prints glistened, fresh. I stood there staring at them, my brain catching up to what I was seeing. I'd rung the bell at 2:11. I'd mopped the footprints with salt water. I'd restarted the clock. I'd followed every single rule. But the footprints were back, and they were leading toward the bell. That's when I understood. The bell hadn't satisfied anything. It announced me. It told the house I was here. I was compliant. I was ready. My stomach dropped. The servant bell started ringing. One sharp, bright note, then silence, then another. I walked down the hallway fast, my boots echoing on the hardwood. The bell was ringing on its own, the red fabric cord swaying with each pull even though no one was touching it. The wooden handle jerked down, released, jerked down again. Once per second. Regular. Mechanical. I counted. 11 rings. Then it stopped. The silence felt worse. I turned and looked back toward the foyer. The wet footprints were still there, bigger than before, leading past the staircase toward the kitchen hallway. Behind me, I heard movement in the mudroom. Josie. I walked back through the foyer. Josie was standing in the mudroom doorway, the keyring clutched in her right hand. She'd picked it up. I didn't know when. Her eyes were still pale and filmed, but her mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear at first. Then I got close enough. "It'll end," she whispered. Her voice sounded wet, drowned. "Open the door and it'll end. No more grief, no more waiting, just like Stephen." My chest tightened. She took a step toward the side door. The way drowning ended it for him. I grabbed her shoulder and shoved her back against the wall. The keyring clattered to the floor. She blinked, slow. Her mouth kept moving, but no sound came out. I picked up the keys and shoved them into my parka pocket. The metal was cold through the fabric, colder than it should have been. Something clicked in my head then, sharp and clear. The rules weren't protections. I'd figured that out already, but they weren't just conditioning either. They were constraints. The thing outside Whatever was using Stephen's voice, whatever left those footprints, it was bound by the same rules it made me follow. The chain kept it from coming in. The bell kept it on schedule. The clock kept it timed to specific hours. All of it was structure, boundaries. And if those boundaries broke, if it actually got what it wanted tonight, if it fed on someone hollowed out enough to let it in, it wouldn't need the rules anymore. It would stop pretending there were limits. My hands were shaking. I looked at Josie slumped against the wall, her eyes still pale and wrong, and I knew she'd been halfway gone before she ever unlocked that chain. Maybe for years, maybe since the first night she'd worked here. I turned and ran. Through the mudroom, into the hallway, past the wet footprints that were spreading now, pooling wider on the marble. I didn't look at them. I made it to the foyer and hooked left toward the main staircase. The mop was leaning against the wall where I'd left it after cleaning the first set of prints. I grabbed the handle, yellow fiberglass, lightweight. The mop head was still damp and gray. The grandfather clock ticked upstairs. Steady. Regular. 2:13. 2:14. 2:15. Dragging time forward, pulling it toward 2:11 again like the hour could loop if the house wanted it to. I took the stairs, 2 at a time. The second floor landing opened up. Dark wood, tall windows. The grandfather clock standing against the east wall, its brass face reflecting the moonlight coming through the glass. The pendulum swung behind the panel, slow, heavy. Tick, tick, tick. I raised the mop handle over my shoulder and swung it like a bat. The glass panel exploded. Shards sprayed across the landing, tinkling against the hardwood, scattering across the rug. The pendulum jerked and stopped mid-swing. The ticking cut off. I hit it again. The brass face caved inward. The clock hands bent. The wooden case splintered along the side, a long crack running from the top down to the base. I kept swinging. The mop handle snapped on the fourth hit, the fiberglass splintering in my hands. I dropped the broken piece and stepped back, breathing hard. The clock was destroyed. The face smashed. The pendulum hanging crooked. The case split open. Silence. No ticking. No pressure shift. No metallic click through the floor. Just whined against the windows and my own breathing. I stood there, hands still shaking, splinters of glass crunching under my boots. Downstairs, the servant bell rang once, then stopped. The clock hands loosened and spun free. Just spun, no resistance, like the mechanism underneath had let go all at once. The minute hand made 3 full rotations before it dropped off completely and clattered onto the hardwood. The hour hand kept spinning slower, wobbling, until it stopped at a random angle pointing nowhere. The mansion shuddered, not settling, not wind. The whole structure reacted like a body taking a blow. The walls groaned inward, and the floorboards buckled under my boots, and I grabbed the banister to stay upright. The shudder rolled through the building from top to bottom, and I heard something deep in the foundation crack, with a sound like ice breaking on a frozen lake, then water. It came up through the floor vents first. I saw it from the landing, dark water pushing up through the iron grates in the foyer below, spreading fast across the marble in thin sheets. It smelled like the lake, algae and rot and cold mineral tang all mixed together. The water didn't pool. It just kept coming, more than should have fit in the pipes, pouring out of every low vent and spreading toward the rugs. I stepped back from the railing and glass crunched under my heel. The broken clock face reflected nothing now. The pendulum hung crooked and still. Downstairs, I heard the wet sound of water hitting fabric. The entry rug was soaking through, its edges going dark. Water crept under the velvet ropes and toward the base of the main staircase, slow but steady, like it had intention. I ran. Down the stairs, boots slipping on the last 3 steps where water had already reached. I caught myself on the newel post and turned toward the mudroom. Josie was still there, slumped against the wall where I'd shoved her. Her eyes were still filmed over, pale and wrong, and her mouth was moving without sound. Water was seeping under the side door, a thin line creeping across the mudroom tiles toward her boots. I grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. She didn't resist, didn't help either. Her weight was wrong, too heavy, like she was waterlogged all the way through. I dragged her into the hallway and she shuffled along beside me with her head tilted back and her mouth still forming words I couldn't hear. The wet footprints I'd seen earlier were spreading. The narrow prints with the 2 long toes had turned into wide dark pools on the marble, each one bleeding into the next, making a trail that led toward the kitchen hallway. The algae smell was thick enough to choke on. I pulled Josie past the foyer and toward the main staircase. Water was coming up through a floor vent near the library entrance, pooling fast and running toward the center of the house. I didn't know where to go. The office was too exposed. The study had windows. The basement would flood first. Then I remembered the ballroom. Rule 3. Never cross the carpeted ballroom after midnight. I dragged Josie toward the main stairs and started climbing. She came along without resistance, her boots hitting each step a half second after mine. Her breathing sounded wet. At the second-floor landing, I stepped over the broken glass and kept going. The grandfather clock was a ruined shell now, its case split open and pendulum hanging at an angle. I didn't look at it. 3rd floor. 2 sitting rooms and then the double doors at the north end. I shouldered through them and pulled Josie into the ballroom threshold. The red and gold carpet stretched 40 feet in front of me, lit by moonlight coming through the tall windows. The floor looked dry. No water here yet. I stopped at the edge of the carpet and didn't cross. Josie stood beside me, swaying slightly. Her coat was damp at the hem and her hair had come loose from its bun, hanging in wet strands around her face. Her eyes stayed pale and wrong. I needed salt. I let go of Josie's arm and she stayed upright, still swaying, staring at nothing. I turned and ran back through the sitting rooms, down the main stairs, past the second-floor landing with its shattered clock, and down to the foyer. Water was ankle-deep now, cold enough to bite through my boots. It lapped at the bottom steps and spread across the marble in dark, rippling sheets. The kitchen was on the other side of the foyer. I waded through, each step making soft, splashing sounds, and pushed through the swinging door. The kitchen lights were still on. Water was seeping up through the baseboard vents, pooling under the industrial stove and creeping toward the pantry. I yanked open the pantry door. Shelves of dry goods, canned items, boxes stacked neatly. And on the bottom shelf, beside the bundled salt packets Josie had left under the sink, were 3 large cylindrical containers of Morton salt, the blue ones with the metal spouts. I grabbed all 3, cradling them against my chest, and turned back toward the hallway. The utility sink in the corner was overflowing. Water poured out of the drain in a steady upward stream, filling the basin and spilling onto the floor. I heard that wet exhale again, deep and slow, vibrating up from below. I didn't stop. I pushed back through the swinging door into the foyer. The water was deeper now, halfway to my knees, and it pulled at my legs when I moved. The wet footprints were gone, dissolved into the flood. But I could see something moving near the front entrance, a shape inside the water. Fog pressing against the windows from outside, thick and white, and the water inside rippling like something was pushing through it toward the center of the house. I waded to the staircase and climbed. Water dripped from my pants and boots, leaving a trail. I made it to the 2nd floor, then the 3rd, and ran back through the sitting rooms to the ballroom. Josie was still there, standing exactly where I'd left her, right at the threshold, staring into the empty ballroom with her mouth moving silently. I set 2 of the salt containers on the floor and opened the 3rd. The metal spout pulled up with a click. I tilted the container and poured salt across the threshold in front of the carpet, shaking it back and forth to make the line thick. The salt hissed when it hit the floor. Not loud, just a soft, continuous sound like static. I emptied the first container and grabbed the second, pouring it over the same line to make it wider, more solid. A jagged white barrier between the hallway and the ballroom carpet. I stepped back. The salt line was maybe 3 inches wide and ran the full width of the doorway. It looked crude, uneven, but it was there. I heard footsteps below, wet and heavy, slow and deliberate. Coming up the main staircase, I grabbed Josie's arm again and pulled her back from the threshold, away from the salt line. She stumbled and her head lolled to the side, but her eyes stayed fixed on the ballroom. I dragged her into the second sitting room and shoved her behind a velvet-roped chair. She slumped against the wall and didn't move. The footsteps reached the second-floor landing, paused, then kept climbing. I stayed in the sitting room doorway, third salt container in my hands, watching the hallway that led to the ballroom doors. The fog came first. It poured through the doorway at the far end like something fluid rolling low across the floor and filling the hallway in seconds. It was thick, white, and it smelled sweet. That same rot smell from outside, but concentrated, trapped inside the walls. Then the figure. It pushed through the fog at the base of the stairs, a shape inside water and mist, darker than the surrounding gray. It didn't walk. It moved forward in a glide, smooth and wrong, with no footsteps now. Just the sound of water dripping and the wet hush of fog shifting around it. I couldn't see details. The shape was too fluid, edges bleeding into the fog. But the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, joints too straight. Head tilted at that same angle I'd seen on the monitor. It reached the ballroom threshold and stopped. The salt line hissed louder. The figure bent forward, not like a person bending, but like something folding in on itself, and the fog around it thickened and pressed toward the salt. It didn't cross. It turned its head, or the place where a head should have been, toward Josie. She was still slumped behind the chair in the sitting room, visible through the open doorway. Her filmed eyes stared straight ahead and her mouth kept moving, forming the same words over and over. I still couldn't hear them. The figure straightened. Then it moved sideways, gliding along the hallway toward the sitting room door, staying just on the other side of the threshold. It didn't try to cross the salt. It moved around it. I stepped into the doorway, blocking its path to Josie. The fog pressed against my legs, cold and damp, and the sweet smell made my throat close. The figure stopped 3 feet away. I saw it clearer now, not details, just the absence of them. It was a shape made of wet darkness, fog folded into something almost solid, with lake water dripping from edges I couldn't define. Where its face should have been was just more fog, and in the center, something darker, an opening. It bent toward Josie again. The movement was slow, deliberate, like it recognized her, like she was part of its path and always had been. I didn't move. I wanted to. Every part of me wanted to step back, to run, to get away from the thing 3 feet in front of me. But I stayed in the doorway. The figure opened. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't grow or expand. It opened, unfolding from the inside out, and the darkness at its center spread like a mouth made of wet shadow. The fog poured into the opening, and the water on the floor rippled toward it, and the air pressure dropped so fast my ears popped. It folded around Josie. She didn't scream, didn't fight. The fog wrapped around her body, and the wet darkness pulled her in, and she just disappeared. 1 second she was slumped against the wall, mouth moving, eyes pale. The next second, she was gone. The chair she'd been behind tipped over and hit the floor. The figure recoiled. It pulled back fast, collapsing inward, the fog sucking toward its center and the water on the floor retreating in a sudden rush. The shape dissolved into mist, and the mist pulled toward the hallway, flowing back the way it came. I heard the wet hush of it moving down the stairs, fading, and then nothing. Silence. I stood in the doorway, breathing hard. The salt line was still there, hissing softly. The fog was gone. The sitting room was empty except for the overturned chair. Josie was gone. I checked my watch. 3:42. By 4, the water was draining. I heard it first. The sound of pipes pulling liquid back down, drains sucking instead of pushing. I went downstairs carefully, boots squelching, and found the foyer water receding fast. It ran toward the vents in thin streams, disappearing into the floor, leaving wet dark stains on the marble and soaked rugs. The lights steadied. They'd been flickering since the clock broke, dimming and surging, but now they held constant. The overhead chandelier in the foyer glowed yellow and still. The drains ran clear. I checked the utility sink in the kitchen, and the water pouring from it had stopped. The basin was full, but not overflowing. I looked down into the drain and saw nothing. Just darkness. No sound. No exhale. I grabbed the last salt container from the 3rd floor and went outside. The fog was still there, but thinner now, pulling back toward the lake. The temperature was maybe 15 degrees. I could see my breath in thick clouds. The dock light was still on at the end of the pier, dim and yellow through the mist. The boathouse door was still unchained. The chain lay in the snow where Josie had dropped it, half buried. The brass padlock hung from the bracket, open. I picked up the chain. It was heavy, cold enough to burn my bare hands. I looped it back through the bracket, pulling it tight, and fed the padlock through the links. I clicked it shut and tugged twice to make sure it held. Then I poured salt. A thick line across the boathouse door threshold, from one side of the frame to the other. Another line at the base of the dock where it met the path. A 3rd line across the side entrance to the mansion, inside and outside both. I went through every exterior door, front entrance, back staff door, side mudroom, kitchen delivery door I hadn't used. I poured salt across every threshold, thick and even, until the last container was empty. I wasn't trying to understand anymore. I was just containing it, keeping it where it was, keeping it out. The sun started coming up a little past 6. I stood in the driveway beside my truck and pulled out my phone. 2 bars of signal. I dialed 911. The officer who showed up was young, maybe late 20s. She pulled into the back lot in a marked Duluth PD cruiser at 6:43 and got out wearing a heavy jacket over her uniform. Dark hair pulled back, steady eyes, neutral expression. "Albert Castillo?" she said. "Yeah? I'm Officer Boyd. You called about a missing supervisor." I nodded. "Josie Bridges. She was here around 3 a.m. She's gone now." Boyd pulled out a notepad. "Gone how?" "I don't know." She looked at me for a second, then wrote something down. "Walk me through it." I gave her the short version. Josie showed up for an inspection, went outside to check the boathouse. I followed her. She unlocked the chain. I pulled her back inside because she wasn't acting right. After that, I lost track of her. Boyd wrote it all down. She didn't react. Didn't ask if I was sure, just wrote. "You have keys to the property?" she asked. I pulled them from my parka pocket. The boathouse key ring Josie had taken, plus the brass-tagged key Sharon gave me on my first day. Boyd held out an evidence bag, and I dropped them in. "Logbook," she said. I took her inside to the office. The logbook was still on the desk, open to tonight's page. Boyd flipped through it, reading my entries. Grandfather clock restarts. Servant bell. Wet footprints mopped with salt water. She didn't comment, just kept reading. "Security footage?" she asked. I led her to the study. The monitors were working again, all 3 feeds showing live camera angles. Front gate, back lot, shoreline. I rewound the 3rd feed to 2:53 a.m. and let it play. The footage showed Josie's sedan pulling into the lot, Josie getting out, walking to the side entrance. Then it jumped ahead, timestamp still running but the image skipping forward in chunks. and showed Josie outside near the boathouse, bending over the chain. Her hands moved in the frame, pulling the padlock free, unwinding the links. Then fog rolled across the camera lens, thick and complete, turning the feed white. When it cleared, the boathouse door was visible again. The chain was on the ground. Josie was gone. Boyd watched it twice. She asked me to send her the file. I didn't know how, so she wrote down an email address and said someone from the department would come by to pull the footage properly. She took the logbook, took the laminated rule card off the wall, took my contact information and told me to stay available for follow-up. "Don't leave town without letting us know," she said. I nodded. She left at 7:18. The clerk showed up at 8:30. Different car, county plates, a sedan, dark blue, pulling into the back lot while I was sitting in my truck with the engine running for heat. A man got out, maybe 50, wearing a county office blazer and carrying a briefcase. He walked to my window, and I rolled it down. "Albert Castillo?" "Yeah." "Owen Little, County Property Office." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to me. Plain white, black text. "I'm here to collect records related to the employment contract and site activity logs." I stared at him. "Officer Boyd already took the logbook." "I'm aware. I'm collecting the administrative records, payroll documentation, rule sheets, procedural addendums." I got out of the truck. Little followed me inside to the office. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the manila envelope with the dark blue county seal stamped on the flap, the one my cash payments came in. I handed it to him. "That it?" he asked. "Far as I know." Little opened his briefcase and slid the envelope inside. He pulled out a clipboard with a form on it and checked a few boxes. Then he looked at me. "Glen Sheen Mansion will be closed for the winter pending administrative review," he said. His voice was flat, careful. "Your employment contract is terminated effective this morning. You'll receive final payment within 14 business days." "Review for what?" I said. "Safety and operational compliance. Josie Bridges is missing." "I'm aware." Little clicked his pen and made another mark on the form. "That's part of the review." He didn't ask what happened, didn't ask if I saw anything. He just stood there with his clipboard and his county blazer waiting for me to leave. I left. I drove south out of Duluth at 9 a.m. with salt under my fingernails and 3 extra containers of Morton in my glove box. I didn't stop near shorelines, didn't stop at all until I hit the Wisconsin border and needed gas. The rules weren't superstition. They were a system, a structure built to contain something that had been there long before Josie, long before me, long before the house got its name. And the system had already taken one more person. I kept driving. The lake disappeared behind me in the rearview mirror, and I didn't look back.